The concrete dust hung thick in the morning air, settling into Leo Martinez's lungs like a familiar weight. His calloused hands gripped the steel beam, muscles screaming against the strain as he guided it into position. 20 years of this work had carved deep lines into his face, weathered his skin to leather, but his grip remained steady. Had to be. Every dollar mattered. "Martinez! You got this, or what?" shouted the foreman from across the site. Leo nodded, sweat already beading on his forehead despite the early hour. The beam clicked into place with a satisfying thud, and he allowed himself one moment to breathe before moving to the next task. His back ached with that familiar fire, the kind that started sharp and settled into a dull throb that would follow him home. But he pushed through it. He always pushed through it. The sun climbed higher, and Leo's world narrowed to the rhythm of work. Lift, carry, position, secure. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, even as his body protested each motion. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Luis Ortega, his work partner of 15 years, caught his eye from across the scaffolding. "You look like hell, hermano," Luis called out during their brief water break. Leo shrugged, wiping his face with a dirty rag. "I look the same as always." "That's what I'm saying," Luis laughed, but concern flickered in his eyes. "When's the last time you took a day off?" Leo couldn't remember. Days blended together in an endless cycle of work and exhaustion. But taking time off meant less money. And less money meant Sophia's dream slipping further away. He'd rather collapse than let that happen. "Sophia's got her SATs next month," Leo said instead, taking a long drink of water. "She's been studying every night until 2 in the morning. Luis's expression softened. He had kids too, understood the weight of their hopes pressing down on your shoulders. "She's gonna do great, Leo. That girl's got brains like her mama had." The mention of Eva sent a familiar pang through Leo's chest. She would have been so proud to see Sophia now, 17 and brilliant, her eyes fixed on a future that neither of them had ever dared to imagine. Eva had always believed their daughter would do something extraordinary. Leo was determined to make sure she could. Miles away from the construction site, Sofia Martinez sat hunched over her textbooks in the cramped kitchen of their modest apartment. Medical terminology swam before her tired eyes, but she forced herself to focus. Each page brought her closer to her goal, closer to the moment when she could finally repay her father for everything he'd sacrificed. She glanced at the clock, 11:47 p.m. Her father would be home soon from his second job, the night security shift that paid for her prep books and college applications. The thought made her stomach twist with a familiar mixture of gratitude and guilt. The front door creaked open just after midnight. Leo tried to move quietly, but his work boots betrayed him against the thin floors. Sophia looked up as he appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face gray with exhaustion, concrete dust still clinging to his clothes. "Micha, you should be sleeping," he said softly, setting down his lunchbox with hands that shook slightly from fatigue. "I could say the same to you, Papa." Sophia closed her textbook and really looked at him. When had those lines around his eyes gotten so deep? When had his shoulders started to curl forward like that? "Sit down. I'll heat up the dinner I saved for you." Leo wanted to protest, to tell her she needed her rest more than he needed food, but the weight in his legs made the decision for him. He sank into the kitchen chair with a barely suppressed groan. Sophia moved around the small kitchen with quiet efficiency, heating up the rice and beans she'd made earlier. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the unspoken understanding that had developed over years of being just the two of them against the world. "How was the studying today?" Leo asked, watching his daughter's face in the warm glow of the stove light. "Good. Dr. Martinez's daughter is going to be Dr. Martinez," Sophia said with a small smile, the same joke she'd been making since she was 12 and first announced her career plans. Leo's heart swelled with pride so fierce it almost hurt. "Your mama would be so proud of you." Sophia placed the warm plate in front of him, her hand briefly touching his shoulder. His muscles were like stone beneath her fingers. "She'd be proud of you too, Papa. You're the one making all this possible." Leo looked down at his food, suddenly unable to meet her eyes. I'm just doing what any father would do." "No," Sophia said firmly, sitting across from him at their small table. "Not any father works 3 jobs. Not any father sacrifices everything so his daughter can chase a dream that probably seems impossible." The word impossible hung in the air between them. Sophia immediately regretted it, but Leo just smiled, that soft, tired smile that always made her chest ache. "Nothing's impossible for you, Mija. You're going to be an amazing doctor." Sophia reached across the table and took his weathered hand in hers. "I'm going to take care of you someday, Papa. When I'm Dr. Martinez, you'll never have to work like this again." Leo squeezed her hand gently, his own dreams buried so deep he'd almost forgotten they existed. All that mattered was the light in his daughter's eyes, the fierce determination that reminded him so much of Eva. "Just focus on your studies," he said. "That's all I need." But as Sophia watched him struggle to lift the fork to his mouth, his hand trembling with exhaustion, she wondered if her dreams were worth the price he was paying. The thought scared her, so she pushed it away, back to the dark corner of her mind where all her doubts lived. Neither of them spoke about the cost. Neither of them acknowledged the way his breathing had grown labored, or how his hands shook when he thought she wasn't looking. Love, Sophia was learning, sometimes meant pretending not to see the very thing that was killing the person you loved most. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, thin and official in the stack of bills Leo carried up from the mailbox. Sophia's hands shook as she tore open the envelope, her father standing behind her in their small kitchen, still in his work clothes from the night shift. "Dear Ms. Martinez," she read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper, "we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into the medical program at—" The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. Leo's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on top of her head as they both stared at the letter that represented everything they'd worked toward. "I did it, Papa," she whispered. "No, mija," Leo said, his voice thick with emotion. "We did it." But as the months passed and Sophia dove into the demanding world of medical school, we began to feel more like I. The coursework was relentless, the competition fierce. Sophia found herself staying later in the library, studying until her eyes burned and her back ached from hunching over textbooks that cost more than Leo made in a week. Dr. Natalie Harris noticed Sophia's intensity during their first clinical rotation. The older woman had been practicing medicine for 30 years, her silver hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, her keen eyes missing nothing. "Martinez," Dr. Harris called out after Sophia had spent 14 straight hours reviewing cases. "My office, now." Sophia's stomach dropped. She'd been certain she was performing well, but doubt crept in as she followed Dr. Harris down the hospital corridor. "Sit," Dr. Harris commanded, settling behind her desk with a stack of patient files. "Tell me about your father." The unexpected question caught Sophia off guard. My father?" "Yes, the man who raised you. The one you mentioned in your admission essay about sacrifice and determination." Dr. Harris leaned back in her chair, studying Sophia with the same intensity she used to examine X-rays. "When's the last time you called him?" Sophia's mouth went dry. She couldn't remember. Between classes, studying, and clinical rotations, days blended together in a haze of medical terminology and exhaustion. It's been a few days. Maybe a week?" Dr. Harris made a note on a pad. "And when's the last time you went home? Really went home? Not just to sleep and leave again?" "Dr. Harris, I don't understand why." "Medicine is demanding," the older woman interrupted. "It will take everything you're willing to give it, and then ask for more. But if you lose yourself in the process, if you forget the people who love you and the reasons you became a doctor in the first place, you'll end up being a brilliant physician and a hollow human being." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. She thought of her father's tired eyes, the way his shoulders had seemed more stooped the last time she'd really looked at him. When had she stopped really looking? That evening, Sophia made the 20-minute subway ride home instead of staying in the library until midnight. She expected to find Leo relaxing after work, maybe watching the old television they'd had since she was in middle school. Instead, she found him asleep at the kitchen table, his face pressed against an open newspaper, a half-eaten sandwich growing stale beside him. "Papa?" she said softly, touching his shoulder. Leo jerked awake, his eyes unfocused and confused before they settled on her face. "Sophia? What are you doing home?" "I live here," she said, trying to keep her voice light, but concern crept in as she noticed the grayish tint to his skin, the way his breathing seemed labored even at rest. "Are you feeling okay?" "Just tired," Leo said, straightening in his chair with visible effort. "Long day. How are your studies going?" Sophia wanted to tell him about her classes, about the patient whose life she'd helped save during her surgery rotation, about Dr. Harris and her challenging questions. But looking at her father's exhausted face, the words seemed selfish. "They're going well," she said simply, "but I miss talking to you, really talking." Leo's expression softened. "I miss it too, mija. But this is temporary, no? Soon you'll be Dr. Martinez, and all this hard work will be worth it." Sophia nodded, but something cold had settled in her stomach. She made them both coffee and sat across from him at their familiar table, the same spot where she'd studied for the SATs, where they'd opened her acceptance letter, where they'd shared 1,000 quiet moments over the years. "Tell me about work," she said. Leo shrugged. "Same as always. We're building a new office complex downtown, 22 floors." "Are you still working the night security job too?" Leo's hesitation was so brief she almost missed it. "Just a few nights a week now." Sophia knew he was lying. She'd seen the security company uniform hanging in his closet just yesterday, the fabric worn thin from constant use. But she didn't call him on it, just as he never called her on the nights she claimed to be studying with classmates when she was really hiding in the library because she couldn't bear to see how tired he looked. Later that night, Sophia called her childhood friend Isabel while walking back to her small apartment near the medical school. "I think something's wrong with Papa," she said without preamble when Izzy answered. "Wrong how?" Izzy's voice was immediately alert. She'd known Leo since they were kids, had spent countless afternoons at their kitchen table doing homework while Leo made them grilled cheese sandwiches. "He's different, tired all the time, and thin, Izzy. When did he get so thin?" "Soph, when's the last time you really spent time with him? Like, more than just passing through?" The question stung because Sophia knew the answer. Months. It had been months since she'd sat down for a real meal with her father, since they'd watched a movie together, since she'd done anything other than rush in and out of their apartment like a stranger. "I've been busy." "I know," Izzy said gently, "but maybe being busy isn't the same thing as being successful. Maybe Dr. Martinez needs to remember Sophia Martinez sometimes." After hanging up, Sophia stood outside her apartment building, looking up at the city lights that never dimmed, thinking about the cost of dreams and wondering if she was paying the right price for hers. Somewhere across the city, her father was probably still awake, probably still working, probably still sacrificing pieces of himself for her future. For the first time since starting medical school, Sophia wondered if her success was worth what it was costing the man who loved her most. The graduation ceremony was held on a perfect May morning, the kind of day that made promises seem possible. Sophia stood in her black cap and gown, diploma in hand, scanning the crowd of proud families until she found him. Leo sat in the middle section, his best shirt pressed but hanging loose on his increasingly thin frame. When their eyes met, his face lit up with such pure joy that Sophia's chest tightened. He'd taken the day off work for this, something he never did, and she could see it had cost him. The dark circles under his eyes seemed deeper, his skin had a grayish undertone that hadn't been there when she'd started medical school 4 years ago. But his smile could have powered the entire auditorium. After the ceremony, Leo pulled her into a hug that felt different. His arms, once so strong they could lift her off the ground even when she was a teenager, now felt fragile around her shoulders. He held her longer than usual, as if he needed the contact to convince himself she was real. "Dr. Martinez," he whispered in her ear, his voice thick with emotion. "My daughter, the doctor." "We did it, Papa," Sophia said, echoing his words from her acceptance letter, but something felt hollow about it now. Looking at him, really looking, she could see the price written in every line of his face. "You did it," Leo corrected gently. I just got to watch." That evening, Sophia started her position as a resident at City General Hospital. The transition from student to doctor was jarring, the weight of actual responsibility settling on her shoulders like lead. She found herself working 16-hour shifts, collapsing into the on-call room for brief naps before starting again. It was during her 3rd week that she got the call. "Is this Sophia Martinez?" The voice was unfamiliar, professional. "Yes, this is Dr. Martinez." The title still felt strange on her tongue. "This is City General's emergency department. Your father, Leo Martinez, was brought in about an hour ago. He collapsed at a construction site. The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. She was already moving, grabbing her keys, her hands shaking as she tried to process what she'd heard. Leo never got hurt. Leo was invincible, unbreakable. Leo was the foundation everything else was built on. She found him in bed 7 of the emergency department, looking impossibly small against the white sheets. His eyes were closed, an oxygen mask over his face, monitors beeping steadily around him. Luis Ortega sat in the plastic chair beside the bed, his work clothes dusty, his face grave. "How long has he been like this?" Sophia asked, her medical training taking over even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "It's been building for months," Luis said quietly, "maybe longer." He wouldn't admit it, but we could all see it. The coughing that wouldn't go away, the way he'd have to sit down more often, the weight loss. Sophia stared at her father's face, seeing things she'd been too busy to notice. The hollows beneath his cheekbones, the way his chest rose and fell with too much effort, the calluses on his hands that seemed more prominent because the rest of him had grown thin. "The doctor said it's his lungs," Luis continued. "All those years breathing in dust, chemicals, whatever was in the air at the job sites. And his heart. Sophia, he's been working himself to death." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Sophia felt something break inside her chest, a clean snap like a bone under too much pressure. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the attending physician, found Sophia in the hallway 20 minutes later, staring at the floor with unseeing eyes. "Dr. Martinez?" Dr. Walsh's voice was gentle. "I have your father's test results." Sophia looked up, her training warring with her fear. "How bad is it?" "Significant lung damage consistent with prolonged exposure to construction dust and chemicals. Early-stage pneumoconiosis. His cardiovascular system is also compromised. Chronic fatigue has put strain on his heart." Dr. Walsh paused, her expression sympathetic. "This didn't happen overnight. These conditions develop over years, decades even." "Will he?" Sophia couldn't finish the question. "With proper treatment, rest, and significant lifestyle changes, we can slow the progression." "But Dr. Martinez," Dr. Walsh hesitated, "this level of damage suggests your father has been ignoring symptoms for a very long time. Probably working through pain and difficulty breathing that would have sent most people to seek help months ago." Sophia nodded numbly. Of course he had. Leo Martinez had been ignoring his own pain for as long as she could remember, pushing through exhaustion and injury for one reason: her. Her education, her dreams, her future. When she returned to his room, Leo was awake, the oxygen mask replaced with a nasal cannula. His eyes found hers immediately, and she saw something there she'd never seen before. Fear. Not fear of dying, but fear of disappointing her. "I'm sorry, Misha," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to worry you." Sophia sat in the chair beside his bed, taking his weathered hand in both of hers. "Papa, why didn't you tell me you were sick?" Leo's eyes filled with tears he was too proud to let fall. "Because you were so close to becoming everything your mama and I dreamed you could be. I couldn't let my problems get in the way of that." "Your problems?" Sophia's voice cracked. "Papa, you're not a problem. You're my father. You're the most important person in my world." "No," Leo said firmly, squeezing her hand with what strength he had. "Your career is what matters now. You worked so hard, sacrificed so much." "I sacrificed?" Sophia laughed, but it came out harsh and bitter. "Papa, I didn't sacrifice anything. You did. You sacrificed everything. Your health, your happiness, probably years of your life, also I could have a dream." Leo looked confused by her anguish. "That's what fathers do, Sophia. We give our children better than we had." "But what if the cost is too high?" Sophia whispered. "What if I don't deserve what it cost you?" For the first time in her memory, Leo looked angry. "Don't you dare," he said, his voice stronger than it had been since she'd arrived. "Don't you dare diminish what you've accomplished. You are Dr. Sophia Martinez. You save lives. You help people. That is worth everything I gave and more." Sophia sat there, holding her father's hand, surrounded by the sounds and smells of the hospital where she worked, where she was building her career, where she was living the dream he'd made possible. But all she could think about was how little she'd really seen him in the past 4 years, how many nights he'd worked while she studied, how many mornings he'd left for construction sites while she slept. She'd become a doctor, just like they'd planned, but somewhere along the way she'd forgotten to be his daughter. And now, looking at him lying in that hospital bed, she realized that all her medical training might not be enough to save the man who had saved her first. Leo was discharged 3 days later with a list of medications longer than Sophia's arm and strict instructions to avoid physical labor. The ride home in Sophia's car was silent, except for the wheeze in Leo's breathing that no amount of medical intervention seemed able to fully quiet. "The doctor said you need to see a pulmonologist," Sophia said as she helped him up the stairs to their apartment, her hand hovering near his elbow. He moved like an old man now, each step deliberate and careful. "I can make the appointment." "I'm fine," Leo said, the same response he'd given to every suggestion she'd made. "Just need some rest." Sophia bit back her frustration. In the hospital, surrounded by medical equipment and other doctors, it had been easier to think of him as a patient. Here, in their familiar space, he was her father again, stubborn, proud, and absolutely convinced that acknowledging his illness would somehow burden her. Over the next week, Sophia tried to establish a routine that would work for both of them. She scheduled her shifts to be home in the evenings, bought a pill organizer to manage his medications, and stocked the refrigerator with foods the nutritionist had recommended. But every attempt at care met with quiet resistance. "You don't need to come home early," Leo would say when she arrived at 6 instead of midnight. "I can take care of myself." "You didn't take your evening medication," she'd point out, and he'd wave her off with a dismissive gesture. "I forgot. I'll take it later." But Sophia was a doctor now. She could see the signs he was trying to hide, the way he gripped the back of chairs when he thought she wasn't looking, the shallow breathing that never quite seemed to give him enough air, the exhaustion that sleep couldn't touch. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. Sophia arrived home to find Leo in his work clothes, tying his boots. "Where are you going?" she asked, though the sick feeling in her stomach already knew the answer. "Luis called. They need an extra hand on the night shift." Leo didn't meet her eyes. "Just for a few hours." "Papa, no," Sophia stepped between him and the door. "You can't work." "The doctor said." "The doctor said a lot of things." Leo's voice was sharp, sharper than she'd ever heard it directed at her. "But doctors don't pay rent. Doctors don't buy groceries. I can pay for those things now. I have a job, insurance. I don't want your money." The words came out harsh, final. Leo's face flushed with anger and something that looked like shame. "I've been taking care of us since you were 7 years old. I don't need my daughter to support me like I'm some kind of invalid." "But you are." Sophia's voice broke on the words. "Papa, you're sick, really sick. And if you keep working like this, you're going to die." The word hung between them like a physical presence. Leo's expression shifted, the anger draining away to leave something raw and vulnerable. "Maybe that would be better," he said quietly. "At least then I'd die as a man who took care of his family, not as a burden on his daughter's success." Sophia felt something shatter inside her chest. "A burden? Papa, how can you say that?" "Because it's true." Leo sank into the kitchen chair, his work boots unlaced, his hands shaking slightly. "Look at you. You're a doctor. You save lives. You have a future, a career, a chance at a life I could never give you. And here I am, broken down and useless, dragging you backward just when you should be moving forward." "You're not dragging me anywhere," Sophia said, kneeling beside his chair. "You're my father. Taking care of you isn't a burden. It's what people do when they love each other." Leo looked at her with eyes that held 20 years of exhaustion. "Do you know what I used to think about during those long nights at the security job? When my back was screaming and my lungs felt like they were full of glass?" Sophia shook her head, afraid to speak. "I thought about you graduating, walking across that stage in your cap and gown, diploma in your hand. I thought about the moment when you wouldn't need me anymore, when all the sacrifice would finally mean something." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I never thought about what would happen after. I never planned for a life beyond making sure you had yours." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. She understood then that her father's identity had become so wrapped up in providing for her that he'd forgotten how to exist for any other reason. His worth, in his own mind, was tied entirely to what he could give her. "Papa," she said, taking his weathered hands in hers, "do you remember what you told me when I was 16 and I wanted to quit school because I thought I was too stupid for college?" Leo's mouth quirked in the faintest of smiles. "I told you that intelligence wasn't about never struggling. It was about refusing to give up when things got hard." "And what did you tell me when I called you crying during my first year of medical school because I thought I didn't belong there?" "That belonging isn't about being perfect. It's about having the courage to keep trying even when you're scared." Sophia squeezed his hands. "So why don't you think you deserve the same grace you've always given me? Why don't you think you're worth fighting for?" Leo's eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back for months. "Because I don't know how to be anything other than your provider. If I can't take care of you, what am I?" "You're my father," Sophia said simply. "The man who taught me that love means sacrifice, but also that sacrifice means nothing if the person you're sacrificing for doesn't get to love you back." They sat in their small kitchen as the sun set outside their window, surrounded by the accumulated weight of years of unspoken fears and unacknowledged pain. For the first time since she'd started medical school, Sophia understood that healing wasn't just about treating symptoms. Sometimes it was about helping people remember who they were before their pain became their identity. "I'm scared," Leo admitted finally. "Of dying?" "Of living," he said. "Of being someone other than the man who works so his daughter can have a better life. I don't know who that person is." Sophia leaned forward and kissed his forehead, tasting salt and sawdust and 20 years of love. "Then let me help you figure it out. Let me take care of you the way you took care of me. Not because you're a burden, but because you're my father, and I love you." Leo nodded, the movement small but significant. It was the first time in months that he'd accepted help without arguing, the first crack in the wall of pride that had been slowly killing him. Outside, the city moved on in its relentless rhythm, but inside their small apartment, something fundamental had shifted. The dynamic that had defined their relationship for 20 years was changing, and for the first time since her graduation, Sophia felt like they might both survive it. Sophia took her first real day off in 6 months the following Saturday. Not a few hours between shifts, not a rushed visit home. An entire day with no hospital, no patients, no pager. She found Leo in the living room, sitting in his recliner with a cup of coffee that had gone cold in his hands, staring out the window at nothing. "Want some company?" she asked, settling onto the couch beside him. Leo looked surprised, as if he'd forgotten she lived there. "Don't you have work?" "Studying to do?" "Nope, today I'm just Sophia, not Dr. Martinez." She tucked her legs under her, the same way she used to when she was a child, and they'd watch cartoons together on weekend mornings. "Tell me something I don't know about you." "Mija, I'm your father, you know everything about me." Sophia studied his profile, noting the deep lines around his eyes, the gray that had crept into his hair while she wasn't looking. "I know you work construction. I know you love me more than anything. But what did you want to be when you were my age? Before Mom died, before you had to take care of everything?" Leo was quiet for so long that Sophia thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a wistfulness she'd never heard before. "I wanted to be a teacher," he said. "Elementary school. I liked the idea of helping kids discover things, watching their faces light up when they understood something new." Sophia felt her chest tighten. "What happened to that dream?" "Life happened. Your mother got pregnant with you, and we were so young, so broke. I needed work that paid immediately, not something that required more school we couldn't afford." Leo shrugged, but Sophia could see the old disappointment in his shoulders. Then Eva died, and there was no room for dreams anymore, just survival. "Do you regret it?" Leo turned to look at her fully. "Regret loving you? Regret making sure you had opportunities I never had?" "Never." His expression softened. "But sometimes I wonder what it would have been like, standing in front of a classroom, helping kids learn to read." Sophia had never imagined her father as anything other than who he was. Steady, strong, the foundation everything else was built on. The idea that he'd once had dreams, that he'd given them up so completely she'd never even known they existed, made her feel like she was seeing him for the first time. "Tell me about Mom," she said impulsively. "Not the things you always tell me. That she was beautiful and smart and loved me. Tell me something real, something that was just yours and hers. Leo's face transformed, years falling away as he smiled. She used to sing while she cooked, terrible songs, made-up words. She couldn't carry a tune to save her life, but she'd belt out these ridiculous ballads about whatever she was making for dinner. He laughed, the sound rusty from disuse. The enchanted chicken, the magical rice and beans. You'd dance in your high chair, clapping your little hands. Sophia could almost see it, her mother young and alive, her father laughing instead of working, herself small and carefree in a world where dreams still seemed possible. She sounds wonderful. She was. Leo's voice grew quiet. She used to say that love wasn't about grand gestures. It was about choosing each other every day, even when things got hard. Is that why you never remarried? Because you were still choosing her? Leo considered this. Partly. But also because I was so focused on being both parents to you that I forgot how to be just Leo. After a while, I didn't know what I'd have to offer someone else. They talked until the afternoon sun slanted low through their windows, sharing stories and memories that had been buried under years of routine and responsibility. Sophia learned that her father had once written poetry, that he taught himself to cook by calling his mother long distance and writing down her instructions, that he'd cried the first time she called him Papa instead of Daddy. "What about you?" Leo asked as Sophia made them sandwiches for lunch. "What do you want that has nothing to do with being a doctor?" Sophia paused, surprised by the question. I don't know. I've been focused on medicine for so long, I'm not sure what else I want." "There has to be something. A hobby, a dream, a person you'd like to get to know better." Sophia thought about it as she cut Leo's sandwich into triangles the way he'd done for her when she was small. "I'd like to travel, see places that aren't hospitals or textbooks. I'd like to learn to cook something other than ramen and frozen dinners. And maybe—" She hesitated, feeling foolish. "Maybe what?" "Maybe I'd like to fall in love. Real love, not just someone to study with or grab coffee between classes. Someone who makes me laugh, the way Mom made you laugh." Leo's expression grew tender. "You deserve all of that, Misha. But you know you don't have to choose between taking care of yourself and taking care of me, right? I don't want my problems to stop you from living your life." Sophia set their plates on the table and sat across from him. "And I don't want you to think that living my life means leaving you behind. We're family, Papa. We figure it out together." That evening, they watched old movies on their ancient television, sharing a blanket and a bowl of popcorn. Leo dozed off halfway through the second film, his breathing still labored but more peaceful than Sophia had heard it in weeks. She stayed beside him, studying his face in the flickering light from the screen. For the first time since his collapse, Sophia felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. Not the desperate, driving hope that had carried her through medical school, but something quieter and more sustainable. The hope that maybe they could find a way to move forward that didn't require either of them to sacrifice everything. When Leo woke near midnight, disoriented and apologetic, Sophia helped him to his bedroom and made sure he took his medications. As she turned to leave, he caught her hand. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For reminding me that I'm still a person worth knowing. I'd forgotten that somewhere along the way." Sophia squeezed his hand. "I'd forgotten too, but I'm remembering now." As she got ready for bed in her own room, Sophia realized that healing, for both of them, might be less about medical intervention and more about remembering how to be a family instead of just a patient and a caregiver. It was a start, small, fragile, but real. The call came during Sophia's lunch break on a Tuesday that had started like any other. She was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, mechanically eating a salad while reviewing patient charts, when Dr. Harrison from cardiothoracic surgery approached her table. "Dr. Martinez, do you have a moment?" Sophia looked up, surprised. Dr. Harrison was legendary at City General, brilliant, demanding, and notorious for his selectivity when it came to residents. She'd observed him in surgery a few times, but had never spoken to him directly. "When would it start?" Sophia asked, though part of her already knew she couldn't accept. "September, 2 months from now." Dr. Harris leaned forward, her expression serious. "Sophia, this is the kind of opportunity that comes once in a lifetime." Dr. Vasquez's team is on the cutting edge of pandemic preparedness. The work they're doing could save thousands of lives. I can't leave Baltimore, Sophia said quietly. My father is stable, Dr. Harris interrupted gently. I've spoken with Dr. Walsh. His condition is manageable with proper medication and monitoring. He's not dying, Sophia. He's living with a chronic condition that millions of people manage successfully. Sophia stared down at her hands, seeing her mother's fingers in the shape of her knuckles, her father's stubborn set to her jaw reflected in the window behind Dr. Harris. You've been taking care of him for 6 months, Dr. Harris continued. How is he doing? Really? Sophia considered the question honestly. Leo was better. Not physically cured, but emotionally stronger. He'd started attending a support group for people with chronic lung conditions. He was taking his medications consistently. He'd even begun volunteering at the local elementary school, reading to children twice a week, finally touching the teaching dream he'd abandoned decades ago. He's doing well, Sophia admitted. Better than he's been in years, actually. And how are you doing? The question hit Sophia like a physical blow. She thought about her days. Competent, routine, safe. She helped patients with diabetes manage their blood sugar, treated countless cases of strep throat, updated vaccinations. Important work, necessary work, but work that felt small compared to the research possibilities Dr. Harris was describing. I'm fine, Sophia said, but the words felt hollow. You're 28 years old, Sophia. You're brilliant, passionate, and you're slowly suffocating in a life that's too small for who you're meant to become. Dr. Harris's voice was kind but unflinching. Your father sacrificed everything so you could have opportunities like this. What do you think he'd say if he knew you were turning them down? That evening, Sophia sat at their kitchen table with Leo, the Hopkins offer letter spread between them like evidence of a crime. Leo read it slowly, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, his expression growing more amazed with each paragraph. Mija, he breathed finally. This is incredible. Johns Hopkins, research that could change the world. I'm not going, Sophia said quickly. I can't leave you. Not when you're still. Still what? Leo's voice was sharper than she'd heard it in months. Still sick? Still needing my daughter to hold my hand through every doctor's appointment? Sophia was taken aback by his tone. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Leo removed his glasses and fixed her with a stare that reminded her of every lecture she'd received as a teenager. Because what I'm hearing is that you think I'm too weak, too helpless to take care of myself. Papa, that's not. I've been thinking about this for weeks, Leo interrupted, his voice gaining strength. Watching you come home every day looking like you're serving a prison sentence instead of living your dream. You think you're taking care of me, but what you're really doing is punishing yourself. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. I'm not punishing myself. I'm choosing family over career. I thought you'd understand that. I understand sacrifice better than anyone, Leo said quietly. But there's a difference between sacrifice and self-destruction. You're not choosing family, Sophia. You're choosing guilt. The words hit Sophia like a slap. How can you say that? Leo reached across the table and took her hands in his weathered ones. Because I know what guilt looks like. I lived with it for 20 years, convinced that every moment I wasn't working was a moment stolen from your future. It nearly killed me, and it's going to kill you too if you let it. But what if something happens to you while I'm gone? What if? Then Luis will call you, and you'll come home, Leo said simply. What if you stay here and I live another 20 years watching you diminish yourself out of fear? Which one of us could live with that? Sophia stared at him, seeing not the frail patient she'd been protecting, but the strong, determined man who had raised her. When had their roles reversed so completely that she'd stopped seeing his strength? I'm scared, she admitted finally. Of what? Of being like you. Of sacrificing everything for someone else and losing myself in the process. The confession came out in a rush, words she'd been afraid to think, let alone speak. Leo was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on her knuckles. You want to know the difference between us? He said finally. Sophia nodded. I sacrificed my dreams because I thought that was the only way to show love. You're sacrificing your dreams because you think achieving them would be selfish. Leo squeezed her hands. But love isn't about making yourself smaller. It's about becoming the biggest, brightest version of yourself and sharing that light with the people you care about. What if I fail? What if I get to Baltimore, and I'm not smart enough, not good enough? Then you'll figure it out. The same way you figured out organic chemistry, and medical school, and how to be a doctor. Leo's voice was filled with quiet confidence. You're not choosing between me and your career, Misha. You're choosing between fear and possibility. That night, Sophia lay in bed staring at the Hopkins letter until the words blurred together. She thought about Dr. Vasquez's research, about the potential to impact global health policy, about the scared, ambitious girl who had once dreamed of changing the world. At 2 in the morning, she found Leo in the living room, sitting in his chair with a cup of tea, staring out at the city lights. Can't sleep either? She asked, settling onto the couch beside him. Too much thinking, Leo said. Want to know what I'm thinking about? Sophia nodded. I'm thinking about your mother, about how proud she'd be to see the woman you've become. Leo's voice was soft in the darkness. And I'm thinking about how angry she'd be if she knew I was letting you stay small out of fear of losing you. Would you really be okay if I left? Leo turned to face her fully. I'd be heartbroken and terrified, and so proud I wouldn't know what to do with myself. He smiled, the expression visible even in the dim light from the street. But most of all, I'd be okay. Because I'd know that everything we went through, every sacrifice we made, finally meant what it was supposed to mean. Sophia felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she'd been carrying for months finally beginning to untangle. I want to take the fellowship, she said quietly. I know you do. But I also want to take care of you. You can do both, Leo said. Not the way you've been doing it, hovering over me like I'm made of glass, but the way families really take care of each other. With phone calls and visits, and the knowledge that love doesn't disappear just because there are miles between you. Sophia looked at her father, really looked at him, and saw not a burden or a patient, but a man who had spent his entire adult life learning how to love without limits. It was time, she realized, for her to learn the same lesson. Help me write my acceptance letter? She asked. Leo's smile could have lit up the entire city. It would be my honor, Dr. Martinez. The morning of Sophia's departure arrived gray and humid, Baltimore in late August showing no mercy to anyone foolish enough to be moving during the height of summer. Sophia's belongings filled the back of Luis's borrowed truck, 2 suitcases, a box of medical textbooks, and the small wooden cross that had hung above her childhood bed. Leo insisted on coming to the train station despite Sophia's protests about the heat and his breathing. He moved slowly but determinedly through the crowded terminal, his hand gripping her elbow not for support but for connection, as if he could memorize the feeling of her beside him through touch alone. You have Dr. Walsh's number, Sophia said for the 3rd time as they found her platform, and Luis promised to check on you twice a week. Mrs. Rodriguez from downstairs has my Baltimore number and… Misha, Leo interrupted gently. I raised you for 28 years. I think I can manage to keep myself alive for a few months between visits. Sophia attempted a laugh, but it came out shaky. I know, what if I made the wrong choice? What if? Then you'll make a different choice, Leo said simply. That's the beautiful thing about life, Sophia. It's not just one decision. It's 1,000 decisions, and you get to keep making them until you find the ones that fit. Around them, the station buzzed with the energy of people going places, families reuniting, lovers parting, strangers beginning journeys that would change their lives. Sophia watched a young mother struggling with a toddler in suitcases, an elderly couple sharing coffee and quiet conversation, 2 friends embracing goodbye with tears in their eyes. Do you remember, Leo said suddenly, when you were 7 and you tried to run away because I wouldn't let you have ice cream for dinner? Sophia smiled despite her nerves. I made it all the way to the end of our block. You packed that little pink suitcase with 3 pairs of underwear and your stuffed elephant. No clothes, no toothbrush, just underwear and peanut. Leo chuckled at the memory. When I found you sitting on the bus bench, you were crying because you realized you didn't know where you wanted to go. And you sat down next to me and asked if I wanted to go to the park instead. Do you know why I didn't drag you home immediately? Sophia shook her head. Because you needed to learn that wanting to go somewhere new wasn't wrong, even if you weren't ready yet. And I needed to learn that loving you meant letting you test your wings, even when it scared me. Leo's eyes were bright with unshed tears. This is the same thing, just bigger. The boarding announcement echoed through the station, and Sophia felt her chest tighten with panic. This was really happening. She was really leaving the man who had been the center of her world for as long as she could remember. "What if you need me?" she whispered. "Then I'll call you. And if it's an emergency, you'll come home. And if it's not an emergency, we'll figure it out together over the phone." Leo cupped her face in his hands, his palms rough from decades of work but infinitely gentle. "But Sophia, what if you need this opportunity more than I need you to stay?" The question hung between them as passengers began moving toward the train. Sophia thought about Dr. Vasquez's research, about the lab where she'd spend the next 3 years, about the possibility of contributing to something larger than herself. "I love you, Papa," she said, the words carrying the weight of everything she couldn't express. "I love you too, mija, more than you'll ever know." Leo pulled her into a hug that felt like coming home and saying goodbye at the same time. "Now go save the world. Your old man will be here when you get back." Sophia boarded the train with tears streaming down her face, finding her seat by the window so she could watch Leo's figure grow smaller on the platform. He stood there until the train pulled away, one hand raised in farewell, his face proud and heartbroken and hopeful all at once. As Baltimore's skyline came into view 3 hours later, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from Leo. "Safe travels, Dr. Martinez. Your mama and I are so proud. Call me when you get there so I know you didn't try to run away again." Despite her tears, Sophia laughed out loud, startling the businessman in the seat across from her. She was 28 years old, heading toward the biggest opportunity of her career, and her father was still making sure she didn't get lost on the way. Dr. Elena Vasquez was not what Sophia had expected. Barely 40, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a messy bun, and a lab coat covered in coffee stains, she looked more like a harried graduate student than one of the country's leading infectious disease researchers. "Eat cheese. You must be Martinez," Dr. Vasquez said, glancing up from a microscope as Sophia entered the lab. "How was the trip? Terrible, I assume. August in Baltimore is basically a preview of hell." "It was fine," Sophia said, still adjusting to the controlled chaos of the research facility. "Thank you again for this opportunity. I'm excited to get started." "Good, because we're starting immediately. I hope you're ready to forget everything you think you know about medicine." Dr. Vasquez gestured to a workstation covered in petri dishes and computer monitors. "That's your space. Your first project is analyzing infection patterns in urban populations. Think you can handle it?" Sophia nodded, feeling a flutter of excitement she hadn't experienced since medical school. This was different from treating individual patients. This was about understanding systems, patterns, the invisible connections that could determine whether an outbreak became a minor inconvenience or a global catastrophe. "One more thing," Dr. Vasquez said as Sophia settled at her new workstation. "I know you turned down cardiac surgery to be here. I also know you've been taking care of a sick parent. I want you to understand something. This work is important, but it's not worth destroying yourself over. If you need time for family emergencies, take it. If you need to talk through personal stuff that's affecting your focus, my door is open." "Clear?" Sophia felt a knot in her chest loosen that she hadn't even realized was there. "Clear." That evening, Sophia called Leo from her small apartment near Johns Hopkins, describing her first day, Dr. Vasquez's unconventional approach, the research that already had her mind racing with possibilities. "You sound different," Leo said after she'd finished describing the lab setup. "Different how?" "Like yourself. Like the Sophia who used to stay up all night reading medical journals because she couldn't put them down, not because she had to." Leo's voice was warm with satisfaction. "Like my daughter who was going to change the world." Sophia looked out her apartment window at the unfamiliar city lights, feeling something she'd almost forgotten, the excitement of not knowing what tomorrow would bring, but being eager to find out. "I think I'm going to like it here," she said. "I think you are too, Mija. I think you are too." 3 months into the fellowship, Sophia had established a rhythm that felt sustainable and satisfying in ways she hadn't experienced since medical school. Her days were spent analyzing data patterns that revealed the hidden architecture of disease transmission. Her evenings split between research writing and long phone calls with Leo, who had news of his own to share. "I've been thinking about going back to school," he said during one of their Tuesday evening conversations. Sophia was sprawled on her apartment floor, surrounded by research papers and takeout containers, while Leo sat in his familiar kitchen chair 6 hours away. "Back to school?" Sophia nearly choked on her Thai food. "Papa, what are you talking about?" "Community college. They have a program for people who want to work with children. Literacy tutoring, after-school programs. It's not exactly teaching, but it's close." Leo's voice carried an excitement Sophia hadn't heard since she was a child. "The volunteering at the elementary school made me realize how much I missed working with kids." Sophia felt a complex mix of emotions: pride, worry, and something that might have been envy. While she'd been afraid to leave him behind, Leo had been quietly building a life that looked remarkably like the dreams he'd abandoned decades ago. "That's amazing," she said, and meant it. "But are you sure you're ready for that kind of commitment? With your health?" "My health is fine," Leo interrupted, a note of gentle firmness in his voice that Sophia recognized from her teenage years. "Dr. Walsh says my numbers are better than they've been in months. The medications are working, I'm sleeping better, and Luis says I'm starting to look like my old self again." Sophia realized that in her worry about leaving Leo alone, she'd failed to consider the possibility that her constant hovering might have been hindering his recovery rather than helping it. The Leo she was talking to now sounded stronger, more confident than the man she'd left in Baltimore 3 months ago. "Tell me about the program," she said, settling back against her couch. Leo's voice lit up as he described the classes: child development, literacy education, classroom management basics. "It's only part-time, and they have evening classes for working adults. I could still do construction a few days a week if I need the money, but Sophia—" He paused, and she could hear the wonder in his voice. "They said with my experience volunteering, I might be able to get a paid position at the community center when I finish the program." "That's incredible, Papa. You'd be an amazing teacher." "We'll see, but it feels good to have something to work toward that's just for me, you know? Something that isn't about taking care of someone else or proving I can still provide." Sophia understood exactly what he meant. Her research work had a similar quality: demanding but energizing, challenging in ways that made her feel more like herself rather than less. "How's your mysterious research project going?" Leo asked, turning the conversation back to her with a parental instinct for knowing when his child needed to talk. "It's not mysterious, just complicated," Sophia said, but she was smiling. "We're tracking antibiotic resistance patterns in urban hospitals, trying to predict where the next superbugs might emerge and how to prevent them." "And in normal person language?" "We're trying to stop the next pandemic before it starts." Leo was quiet for a moment. "Your mother would be so proud," he said finally. "Her little girl, saving the world one microbe at a time." Sophia felt the familiar pang that came with mentions of her mother, but it was softer now, more bittersweet than painful. "I think she'd be proud of both of us. You going back to school at 52, me finally doing work that feels like it matters." "It all matters, Misha. Taking care of individual patients, understanding disease patterns, teaching kids to read, it's all part of the same thing. Making the world a little bit better than we found it." After they hung up, Sophia sat in her small apartment thinking about the different ways people could save each other. For 20 years, Leo had saved her by sacrificing his own dreams for hers. Now they were both learning a different kind of salvation, the kind that came from becoming the fullest versions of themselves and trusting that love could survive the distance. Sophia's first major breakthrough came in November when her analysis revealed a previously undetected pattern in hospital infection rates that could predict antibiotic resistance outbreaks weeks before they became clinically apparent. Dr. Vasquez called it brilliant work and immediately began preparing to present the findings at the International Conference on Infectious Diseases. "This could change how we monitor and prevent hospital-acquired infections globally," Dr. Vasquez told Sophia as they reviewed the data for the third time. "Are you ready to present this to a room full of people who've been doing this work longer than you've been alive?" Sophia thought about the scared medical student who had once been intimidated by attending physicians, about the woman who had almost turned down this fellowship out of fear and guilt. "I'm ready," she said, and was surprised to discover she meant it. The night before the conference presentation, Sophia called Leo to calm her nerves. "I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong," she admitted. "What if I freeze up? What if my research isn't as groundbreaking as Dr. Vasquez thinks? What if—" "Mija," Leo interrupted gently, "do you remember what you told me when I was afraid to apply for the community college program?" Sophia smiled despite her anxiety. That the worst thing that could happen isn't failure, it's wondering, what if, for the rest of your life? Exactly. And what did I tell you when you called me crying during your first week of medical school? That being scared means you're doing something that matters. So what are you going to do tomorrow? Sophia took a deep breath, feeling her father's steady presence across the distance between them. I'm going to get up there and show them what we found, and I'm going to trust that I belong in that room. That's my daughter, Leo said, his voice warm with pride. The one who is going to change the world. Sophia's presentation was a success. Not perfect, but confident and clear. Her research met with the kind of thoughtful questions that indicated genuine interest from the scientific community. Afterward, as she fielded congratulations from researchers whose names she'd only read in textbooks, Sophia felt something settle into place inside her chest. She was Dr. Leo Martinez, infectious disease researcher, contributor to global health policy, saver of lives on a scale she'd never imagined possible. But she was also Leo Martinez, daughter of Leo, product of sacrifice and love, and the unshakable belief that dreams were worth fighting for. That night, she called Leo with the good news, describing the presentation, the questions, the sense of belonging she'd felt in that room full of brilliant minds working to solve the world's most pressing problems. I wish you could have been there, she said. I was there, Leo replied simply. Every word you spoke, every question you answered. I was there. I've been there your whole life, Misha, and I always will be. Sophia smiled, looking out at the Baltimore skyline and thinking about the different ways people could be present for each other. Love, she was learning, wasn't about physical proximity. It was about carrying each other's voices, dreams, and unwavering faith in the spaces between heartbeats, across any distance life might create. 2 years later, Sophia stood at the arrivals gate of Baltimore-Washington International Airport, scanning the crowd for a face she knew, as well as her own reflection. Leo emerged from the stream of passengers looking healthier than she'd seen him in years. His color good, his breathing easy, his shoulders straight, with the quiet confidence of a man who had rediscovered his purpose. "There's my famous daughter," he said, pulling her into a hug that smelled like the cologne he wore only on special occasions and the faint scent of chalk dust that seemed to cling to him since he'd started working at the community center. Famous is an exaggeration, Sophia said, but she was grinning. Her research on antibiotic resistance prediction had been published in 3 major journals and had led to new monitoring protocols in hospitals across the country. More importantly, it had earned her a permanent position on Dr. Vasquez's team and recognition as one of the rising stars in infectious disease research. Dr. Martinez, featured on the cover of Medical Research Quarterly, developer of the Martinez Protocol for Early Resistance Detection, I'd say that qualifies as famous. Leo stepped back to study her face, his eyes bright with paternal pride. You look good, Mija. Happy. Sophia realized he was right. The constant undercurrent of anxiety that had defined her early years as a doctor was gone, replaced by the steady satisfaction of work that challenged her without consuming her. She'd learned to maintain relationships with colleagues, to take weekends off occasionally, to remember that being brilliant didn't require being miserable. You look pretty good yourself, she said, noting the way he moved with confidence instead of the careful fragility that had defined him for so long. How's the new job? Leo's face lit up. 6 months ago, he'd graduated from his community college program and been hired as a full-time literacy coordinator at the East Baltimore Community Center. His days were spent working with children who reminded him of himself at that age, bright, eager, but lacking the resources to reach their full potential. Amazing. Exhausting, but amazing. Leo pulled out his phone to show her pictures from the center's recent reading celebration. We had 30 kids read their first chapter books last month. 30 kids who thought they weren't smart enough to be readers. Sophia scrolled through the photos, seeing her father surrounded by children of various ages, his face animated as he listened to a little girl read from a picture book. In every image, he looked like a man who had found exactly where he belonged. Tell me about Marisol, Sophia said, recognizing the 7-year-old girl who appeared in several photos. Leo had mentioned her in their weekly phone calls, a shy child whose English was still developing, but whose hunger for stories reminded him of Sophia at that age. She's reading at grade level now, Leo said, his voice soft with pride. When she started with us 6 months ago, she could barely get through a simple sentence. Yesterday she finished Charlotte's Web and cried when Charlotte died. Sophia understood the emotion in his voice. This was what her father had been meant to do, not just provide for someone else's dreams, but nurture the dreams of children who needed someone to believe in their potential. They spent the weekend visiting Sophia's favorite Baltimore spots, the harbor, the museum, the small cafe near Johns Hopkins, where she'd spent countless hours reading research papers. But more than showing him her new world, Sophia found herself seeing it through his eyes, understanding how fully she'd built a life that was authentically hers. "I'm proud of you," Leo said, as they sat on a bench overlooking the inner harbor, watching families and couples stroll along the waterfront. "Not just for your career, though that's incredible. I'm proud of the woman you've become." "What do you mean?" "You've learned something I took 50 years to figure out," Leo said, his gaze following a young father teaching his daughter to skip stones. "You've learned that taking care of the people you love doesn't mean disappearing. It means being strong enough, whole enough, that you have something real to offer them." Sophia thought about her recent relationships, the colleague she'd been dating for 6 months who made her laugh until her stomach hurt, the friendships she'd cultivated with other researchers, the mentoring relationship she'd developed with newer fellows. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had a complete identity beyond being Leo's daughter, or Dr. Martinez the achievement. "I learned that from watching you," she said, "watching you rediscover who Leo Martinez was when he wasn't just my provider. We both had to learn it, I think. How to love each other without losing ourselves in the process." That evening, they had dinner at a small restaurant in Little Italy, the kind of place Sophia had never bothered to try when she was too focused on work to notice her surroundings. Over pasta and wine, Leo shared stories from the community center, while Sophia described her latest research project on rural health disparities. "You know what strikes me?" Leo said as they walked back to Sophia's apartment afterward. "We're both still helping people, still trying to make the world better. We just figured out how to do it as ourselves instead of as sacrifices to each other." Sophia nodded, understanding. Her work was still demanding, still important, but it no longer felt like penance for her father's suffering. Instead, it felt like the natural expression of everything he'd taught her about service, persistence, and the responsibility that came with privilege. "I've been thinking about Mom lately," Sophia said as they reached her building, "about what she would think of us now." Leo smiled, the expression soft with memory. "She'd probably say it took us long enough to figure out what she already knew." Which was, that love isn't about making yourself smaller so the other person can feel bigger. It's about both of you becoming as large as you're capable of being, and trusting that there's room in the world for all of that light. The next morning, Sophia drove Leo to the airport for his return flight. At the departure gate, their goodbye was easier than it had been 2 years ago. Still emotional, but without the desperate clinging that had marked her earlier departures. "I'll see you at Christmas," Sophia said, hugging him tightly. "And you promised to send me pictures from the kids' winter reading showcase." 27 chapter books this semester," Leo said proudly. "We're going to need a bigger celebration." "I love you, Papa." "I love you too, Misha. Keep saving the world." As Sophia watched Leo disappear through security, she felt the familiar pang of separation. But it was different now, tinged with anticipation rather than loss. In 6 weeks, she'd fly home for the holidays, spending Christmas morning in their old kitchen, while Leo made his traditional breakfast and told her about his students. Then she'd return to Baltimore in her research, and he'd go back to his classroom, and they'd continue the delicate dance of loving each other across distance. That afternoon, Sophia returned to her lab with renewed energy, diving into data analysis with the focus of someone who knew exactly why her work mattered. Around her, the familiar sounds of research filled the air. Computers humming, colleagues discussing findings, the quiet intensity of minds working to solve problems that affected millions of lives. Dr. Vasquez found her there hours later, surrounded by printouts and empty coffee cups. "Working on a Sunday?" Dr. Vasquez asked, settling into the chair beside Sophia's workstation. "The rural health data is showing some interesting patterns," Sophia said, pointing to a series of graphs on her computer screen. "I think we might be able to predict outbreak vulnerabilities in under-resourced communities with 90% accuracy." Dr. Vasquez studied the data, nodding slowly. "This could revolutionize how we allocate prevention resources. How did you think to approach it this way?" Sophia considered the question, thinking about her father's stories from the community center, about children whose potential was limited by circumstances beyond their control, about the different ways that lack of resources could make people vulnerable. "I guess I was thinking about my family," she said simply. "About how systemic problems affect individual lives, and how sometimes the people who need help most are the ones least likely to get it." Dr. Vasquez smiled. "That's what makes you a great researcher, Sophia. You never forget that behind every data point is a person with a story." As the sun set over Baltimore, Sophia continued working, lost in the satisfying puzzle of epidemiological patterns and prevention strategies. This was her life now, challenging, meaningful, her own. But more than that, it was a life built on the foundation of everything Leo had given her, extended toward a future that honored both his sacrifices and her own dreams. At midnight, her phone buzzed with a text from Leo. "Safe travels to all my kids' dreams. Sleep well, Dr. Martinez. Your papa loves you." Sophia smiled, saving her work and gathering her things. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new data to analyze, new opportunities to contribute to the kind of work that saved lives she'd never meet. But tonight, she was simply Sophia Martinez, daughter of Leo, inheritor of dreams that had finally grown large enough to hold both of their hopes. The weight of dreams, she had learned, wasn't meant to crush you. It was meant to make you strong enough to carry them forward, generation after generation, each person adding their own light to the constellation of possibility that love made real. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.